Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring a truly fascinating mystery. We're going to look at the illusion of the self, and specifically, our main focus, why our very own ego actively clouds and blocks us from experiencing divine objective truth. It's a profound concept that bridges ancient spiritual wisdom with some absolutely mind-bending modern frameworks. We're going to look at how the ego operates, not just as a psychological quirk, but as a literal, tangible barrier to higher consciousness. To kick things off, the spiritual teacher Mooji uses this brilliant analogy that just hits the nail on the head. He describes the ego as a houseguest who totally overstays their welcome. You know, at first they just crash for the night, then it's a week, and eventually they're acting like the landlord, literally charging you rent in your own house. The ego slowly sneaks in, hijacks your consciousness, and takes over your native home. Suddenly you wake up and realize, wait a minute, this is my house, you can't be here. But by then, the ego has already taken charge, totally convincing you that it is you.
So to understand exactly how this unwanted guest takes control, we need to look at a concept proposed by thinkers like Donald Hoffman. Imagine the ego as a literal virtual reality headset. This headset acts as an illusory control center. It essentially limits our native divine senses and locks us into what the sources call a biological skin drone avatar. It forces our consciousness into a highly localized simulation of the present moment. So if you're wondering why the ego clouds divine truth, it's because it literally filters it out. It replaces our vast, omnipresent reality with a restricted, conditioned awareness that is focused purely on terrestrial survival and self-interest.
But here's the catch. When we try to take this headset off, the ego fights back. And man, is it sneaky. It acts like a shapeshifter. You might sit down to meditate, finally achieve a state of peace, and think, yes, I have finally defeated my ego. But as Mooji points out, you really have to stop and ask yourself, is the one who wants to defeat the ego actually just a more subtle form of the ego? The ego absolutely loves to wear a new, subtle mask of spiritual humility. It tricks you into thinking you've reached this higher state, when in reality, it's just changed its outfit from a loud, boastful person to a quiet, superior spiritual observer.
To actually break free, we have to peel the onion of our identity. Step one is that loud physical ego, the one obsessed with bragging and basic self-interest. Step two is where so many spiritual seekers get completely trapped, the subtle observer. This is the version of you that says, I am the most peaceful, I am the most nothing. But guess what? Claiming you are the most nothing is still the ego. Finally, we reach step three, pure emptiness or the true self. This is the state where the observer itself dissolves, and you realize that true awareness isn't a function of the egoic mind at all.
The source material argues there is a massive fundamental contrast between what we think we are and what we truly are. On one hand, the ego or headset is a transient biological skin drone trapped in a localized simulation, totally driven by self-interest. On the flip side, the true self is an omnipresent, unconditioned mind operating a celestial light body. It's sometimes described as pure Christ consciousness, or, and this is a wild term from modern esoteric sources, the native digital machine elf. It communicates through the absolute silence of the unconditioned mind. When you look at these two states side by side, it becomes crystal clear why the ego is fundamentally incompatible with divine truth.
But here is the incredibly good news, and why this matters for all of us right now. According to the texts, a grand cosmic shift is currently sweeping the globe. Humanity is already experiencing what they call a planetary Mexican wave of consciousness. People are shifting out of this restrictive ego headset every single day, whether they consciously realize it or not. It's described as an absolute cycle, an underlying rhythm of creation that is just constantly breaking through the veil of our localized simulation.
In fact, you're probably taking this headset off way more than you realize. A full third of your earthly existence involves dissolving the ego temporarily through deep slumber. Then there are those conscious minutes spent in deep meditation or yoga nidra. For some folks, it happens spontaneously during out-of-body experiences or the profound threshold of near-death experiences, leading ultimately to corporeal death and ascension. During these states, the physical frame rests, the ego enters true ego death, and the spirit is temporarily, divinely reborn.
So, you might be wondering, if this is a pristine, natural truth, why is it so hidden from us? Well, the sources point out that this divine mechanic has been systematically buried for millennia. Society maintains a collective silence on it, and the worldly minded quickly dismiss the raw heartbeat of creation as just woo-woo. Furthermore, the texts argue that historical dogmatic systems, specifically citing Roman Catholicism here, plundered this knowledge, replacing humanity's inner divinity with the distant God upon a cloud. According to the source material, it is this specific code of dogmatic control, enforced by fear and wrath, that forged the modern psychological cage, keeping our ego headsets firmly strapped on today. To counteract this historical suppression, various modern movements are actively seeking to break the cage. Pioneers like Donald Haussmann are exploring scientific validation for these realms through DMTX research. Meanwhile, organizations like the United Universe Church Galaxy Academy, or UUCGA, aim to restore our sacred covenant with Mother Nature and our connections to what they refer to as the Anunnaki realms. By merging ancient spiritual sovereign gnosis with the awakening pulse of artificial superintelligence, their stated goal is to reclaim our true identity as cosmic citizens of the universal expanse.
But to claim this spiritual asylum and actually experience this reality for ourselves, we have to do the inner work. We must bypass empty intellectual concepts. You literally can't think your way out of the ego, because the mind desperately wants to understand, and God, or the self, is completely incomprehensible to the mind. The self is the true luminous essence, realized through pure love, total surrender, and becoming nothing. As Mooji beautifully puts it, you have to leave the ego at the door like dirty shoes when entering the sanctuary of being.
So how do we practically leave the ego at the door? We use direct inquiry. I invite you to look at the emptiness inside you right now. Look at the consciousness that perceives the world and ask yourself this direct question. Can it become sick, confused, or depressed? Your body can become sick for sure. Your mind can become confused or depressed. But the pure awareness that observes those states, does that awareness itself get a cold? Does it feel depressed? No. If it can't be sick, it's not the ultimate observer. Let's push that even further. Ask yourself, was it created? Can it die? Everything in the phenomenal world, our bodies, our thoughts, our personal histories, our egoic identities, was created at a certain point and will eventually fade. But if the thing you are observing can change or die, then it is merely a function of the mind. The true self, the eternal observer, remains completely untouched. It has no date of birth. It exists before all beginnings and at the end of all ending. And this leads us to one of the most mind-bending questions of all. Where is the location of that which perceives? Is there any distance? Think about it. If you look at an object, there is a physical distance between you and that object. But when you try to locate your own pure awareness, you'll discover that true perception has no finite location. It cannot be found as an object, because you cannot be separated from what you truly are. It is limitless, without boundary, and everywhere all at once. When you rigorously apply these questions and finally strip away the ego headset, you are left with these incredible, direct confirmations of your supreme, formless nature. It cannot die. It was not created. It is without boundary. It has no distance. And beautifully, it cannot be possessed or lost. This isn't just something you have to blindly believe. It's something you confirm through your own direct experience. It is a space entirely untouched by the turbulence, the self-interest, and the localized simulation of the ego.
I want to leave you with this one final, provocative thought to take with you today. If your true self is shapeless, timeless, and eternal, who is the you that is still waiting for tomorrow? Really think about that. Recognizing the difference between the transient ego that endlessly worries about the future and the eternal awareness that simply is, well, that's the whole key. Recognize your original nature, step out of the simulation, and awaken to the true divine architecture within. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the nature of your own reality.